Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time we got a few questions, and some of them, the first few, will be Skeleton Crew questions. So if you haven't seen the latest episode, which is the third episode that came out yesterday at the time of recording this, then you may want to skip this video until you have seen it, assuming you're watching Skeleton Crew, and if you're not, you might not find too much interest in this video anyway. But either way, let's kick this off with a question here from Baker7 of 10, who asked, "Hey Thor, what if Palpatine is the one who hid this planet and the great work is how he is able to fund all of his highly expensive projects? The Clone Army, endless resources to fund both sides of the Clone Wars, create the first and second Death Stars, and the Exegol fleet." And you know, as much as I don't want this to connect to the sequel trilogy and begin to explain the Sith fleet on Exegol, this massive fleet of thousands of Star Destroyers that were made in a isolated part of space that was surrounded by some sort of nebula that was near impossible to traverse without a wayfinder device, which there was only 2 of them, and yet they somehow made this, again, a massive fleet there, and don't even think about the logistics of how you got all the materials there, who you found to build it, and all of that, because I'm sure J.J. Abrams didn't think about that when he was writing the script. But anyway, as much as I don't want this to connect to the sequels necessarily, I know we have the saying, all roads lead to the sequel trilogy, and that yes, this is a part of the bigger Disney Star Wars universe, and that in theory it could lead to that. But you know, it's not a terrible theory in all honesty. Now, I don't think that is going to turn out to be the case, but it is quite the mystery of where do all the credits come from for all of these different projects. So it could be that, yeah, that the Sith did take this planet over some time ago. They convinced the people of the planet they were the Republic and told them that this work that you're doing is so secretive and important that we have to isolate you from the rest of the galaxy, that you can't communicate with people beyond the barrier, which was said by one of the droids in this latest episode that they have no communication. I believe they said it was illegal or not allowed or whatever. So that is very fishy, right? That is strange. I don't know that the Republic would have ever told the planet you have to completely isolate yourself from the rest of the galaxy just because you are minting our credits, which is what the planet seems to do. It seems to make credits. It probably, as I've suggested in my other videos, probably has the material, the metal, the resource that is used to create them. It is probably abundant there, so abundant that if you are living on the planet, you don't think of it as anything special because there is so much of it. You have so much of it that how could this ever be valuable to anybody else? But anyway, I just don't think that's going to be the case. My gut tells me that they're not going to make what is essentially basically a kids show or more kid-oriented show. They're not going to turn that into a series where these kids come from a planet that kind of is responsible for funding the Sith. That's where they got their credits from to take over the galaxy. I mean, maybe it would be quite a twist if that were the case, if they have been inadvertently doing the great work for the Sith and funding them, essentially. But I just don't see them doing that. I think it's more along the lines, as I suggested in my review yesterday, that whatever they are doing is kind of left over from a long since forgotten time, since indeed the Old Republic, and I mean Old Republic, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, not High Republic, which does mention a great work. I think they've just been doing what they think is right, what was laid down to them by the Old Republic, and that there is some sort of droid intelligence, maybe, as weird as this is sounding, that has been controlling the planet ever since, that is in charge of their safety droids, because they don't seem to have any police force or humanoid police force. They seem to be run by droids. Even when Wim suggested that he might do something that helps people or protects people, he got laughed at for the idea because we don't need that. We have the droids that just keep everybody safe and nothing bad really happens here, it seems. So yeah, I just think that this planet has been locked behind this barrier. They don't really know what's going on in the rest of the galaxy. They've been doing what was deemed they need to do by the Old Republic many hundreds of years ago and just carrying it on without ever giving it much thought. And that this experience by the kids, they're going to go out, see the rest of the galaxy, learn that they have been isolated, that things have changed radically, and that At-Aten needs to change too to get with the program to take down the barrier and become a part of the galaxy and the New Republic. Alright, and now on to this comment from Cadillac DeMille, who asked, "Hey Thor, do you think Jude Law's character is an example of what a person may be or become who is force sensitive but doesn't get trained by either Jedi or Sith? There's a possibility that he just figured out how he could do things with the Force and use that to his own personal gain, not out of a desire for power, but for survival and profit. Even if this isn't the case, what do you think about that as an idea or a story to tell? What would a Force-sensitive person do if there were no Jedi or Sith to train them? And I certainly do think there is a good chance that Jude Law's character is indeed Force-sensitive, but has never received any sort of training. Now, I know I said in my review that I don't think he is, that it's all trickery, but I think I could be dead wrong, of course, and that he never got trained, he figured some things out on his own, and that he, as you suggest, he uses them to his advantage to profit from. And the things he can do are pretty simplistic. They're moving stuff, essentially. He can see things before they happen. And that is what I think, even if he isn't Force sensitive and it is trickery. But I think that is about the extent that the average kind of strong Force sensitive person could achieve on their own. That you can figure things out. You can learn how to move things and do some basic stuff. But you're never going to achieve anything remotely close to a Jedi or Sith because you're neither embracing the light or the dark necessarily. You're just kind of using it, again, for your personal gain, which you could say is dark side. The Force shouldn't be used to swindle people, which I'm sure he's done if he can. But I don't think he is obviously full dark side. I think you do have to get some training to really learn how to embrace the dark side, though I think it is, as Yoda even says, easier to learn how to use the dark than it is the light. But anyway, not going down that kind of rabbit hole. I do think it would be interesting if he is a Force sensitive, and this is just an example. What happens when you are strong with the Force and don't get any training whatsoever? You learn how to do some little things, but that's about it. And again, maybe he isn't, maybe he is. I'm sure we will find out by the end what his kind of quote-unquote backstory is. But either way, he's interesting, the idea is interesting, and we'll see what they do with it. Alright, moving away from Skeleton Crew for a couple questions, we have this one from Mara, who asked, "Hey Thor, I was wondering, should they use the Lucas version of the sequels with Darth Maul and Darth Talon in it? I just want your opinion." And there are a few things I would love to see more than the George Lucas versions of the sequel trilogy, to know how he would have finished his story. And I'm not saying we necessarily need to see it by decanonizing the sequels. No, I'm not saying I wouldn't be for that. I'm just saying they don't need to do that, I suppose. I'm simply saying I would love to know what his story was. I would love to, again, know how he would have finished Star Wars. And I really think that's one of the problems they had with his sequel treatments, his story treatments for them, why they threw them out, is because I think he was kind of gonna finish the story. He wasn't gonna leave much room for any kind of expansion. We've heard him talk about how it was gonna go into the microbiotic realm and all of these things and deal with the wills and all of that. And I think they saw that, and they saw that, well, first of all, that wasn't well received necessarily in the prequels with midichlorians. A lot of people didn't seem to like that. Plus, I think if you explain the whole mystery, then there's no mystery left, obviously. And if you're Disney and you just paid $4 billion for Star Wars, you want to keep some mystery and you want to explore that mystery for as long as you can, indefinitely, basically. So I think that's part of the reason why they didn't go with the Lucas treatments. Now, that said, I think the smartest thing they could do here in hindsight or after the fact, with them having established the Disney canon and all that, is to perhaps try to work with Lucas as much as he would be willing to work with them, not to make a movie or anything, but to have him flesh out his vision and then to turn it into a book or an animated series even. I again would love to know how George Lucas's sequel trilogy would have gone and how he saw Star Wars essentially finishing, perhaps. Alright, and one more question, and it comes to us from a Toski. I think I'm saying that wrong, so apologies. But they said, "Hey Thor, I love your content. I also like to argue with people about Star Wars, and I hope I don't offend people on here when I do so. I think we all come from different viewpoints on Star Wars, but we also almost all feel slighted in one way or another. Do you think they'll either give us a show or movie to fill the gap between the OT and the sequel trilogy with Luke, Han, Leia, and Lando? Or will we just have to go with our own headcanon, the Legends stuff forever? Disney isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and successful or not, I can't imagine them giving up on Star Wars either." And first of all, yeah, I enjoy quote-unquote arguing with people about Star Wars too, though I try to do it in a friendly way, and I think sometimes online when you're just typing something out, it can come across in the harshest possible way when you don't necessarily mean it to, if that makes sense. I think people tend to read and go for the worst possible reaction. I also agree with you that Star Wars isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And I know people talking about Star Wars is dying or it's dead and Disney is going to give up on it. And even if they did give up on it, they would resurrect it again down the road. And I can't ever see them selling it. The main reason being, if you sold it to the quote-unquote right person or the wrong person from their point of view, and they got it right and they were able to really crank out good content, well, that is going to be huge competition for Disney. Star Wars still is, in theory, the biggest franchise on Earth. And again, if you put it in the right hands, it could do crazy things. It could become the juggernaut it should be and once was. And still is to a degree, let's be honest. There are still a ton of Star Wars fans who are out there and supporting it. As for your question now, I absolutely think we see Han, Luke, Leia, Lando, Chewie, 3PO, R2 in a movie or show or something together someday. Probably a movie if you're going to go that big. I think they realize that is still a gold mine, despite the recent talk about Rey being the future of the franchise, which, in a way, I don't necessarily disagree with. That something else besides them needs to be your future, which doesn't mean you abandon the past. You don't just say, well, we don't use these characters anymore, we don't care about them anymore. But certainly they want to build new iconic characters to expand the franchise, not always go back to the well. Though you don't want to, again, abandon the well entirely, because that is what a lot of people love and the reason why they are fans in the first place. But yeah, at some point in the not too distant future, I would say we will get something with Han, Luke, and Leia. That could even be the Dave Filoni movie, which will be the Mandoverse culmination movie most likely, which will kind of be a take on Heir to the Empire in a manner of speaking, which I don't see how you're going to do something like that without bringing back those core characters from the original series. Either way, whether or not Disney and Lucasfilm want to acknowledge it, those characters are still cash cows. They are still the core of Star Wars. They always will be, to a degree, the core of Star Wars, even if it expands out well beyond them in the distant future. They're always going to be what made Star Wars in the first place, and Disney and Lucasfilm know that. They know that there are people just dying to see those characters one more time the way we wanted to see them in the sequels and didn't see them. We didn't get to see them be really, truly heroic one more time together. They were all kind of broken or reverted back to previous forms or whatever. And sure, some of them had their hero moments, but they didn't get to have them together. That is the biggest mistake the sequels made. And I think someday they will rectify that in probably a movie. And whether or not they recast everybody or they use AI to make them or create them out of the ether, essentially, I don't know. At the rate AI is improving, something tells me it will be an AI movie at some point. But I think a lot of people may reject that, the idea of taking, passed on actors and recreating them in an artificial form. I don't know. We'll see how the future of entertainment plays out. I do hope that AI doesn't take over. I think we always should encourage people to create art all on their own and use AI as a tool, certainly. But I don't want to see the day where we are getting fully AI movies and shows and where human beings stop being creative. But anyway, before getting too deep into that topic, that's going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below. Tell me what you think about my responses to these questions. Tell me your own responses or ask a question for a future lightning response video. You just start your comment off with "Hey Thor," ask your question, and I try to get to it in a future video. But whatever the case may be, leave a comment below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.